Thank you for joining XR Om, which is India's first AR VR focused podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Amar Mehta, who's the GM Game Tech for AWS Lumberyard. So, Amar, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Amazon, one of the biggest company in the world, when it comes to retail. Now you guys have jumped into the 3D engine, the metaverse space. Your competitors are Epic, then there's Nvidia building Omniverse, and then there's quite a lot of other players also. O3DE, what is it, and what nudged Amazon to build an open 3D engine?
Right. Well, thanks for having me on, Eddie. Really exciting time for our industry, and it's great to be here talking to you and talking to your viewers. Yeah. First of all, I'll just point out that, Epic, NVIDIA, these are all great partners for us. I wouldn't necessarily consider them competitors. Our job as AWS is to empower developers. And that's what Epic and NVIDIA are really at the core. They're developers, they're folks providing content creators the world over the technology they need to build more immersive applications. And so we look at Epic and NVIDIA as partners. They're part of this mission to sort of empower developers and content creators generally. And as far as the Open 3D engine goes, we've always had this vision since the formation of this game tech group within AWS to empower developers and content creators. And it was one of those reasons why when we first launched our game engine, the Amazon Lumberyard in 2016, we made it free. Right? So no royalties, no seat commission, no licensing fees of any sort. We also made it source available. And so that was with the belief that we wanted to lower the barrier to entry for content creators the world over. And so that mission hasn't quite changed yet, right? Over the last several years, the Lumberyard team, I think, did a tremendous job adding new capabilities into the engine and making the engine, again, more accessible for everybody. But in late 2019, when I was tapped to head this group, one of the questions I asked myself was, are we actually moving the needle? Is there a need for another game engine in the market? And one of the things that we did at the time was what I think Amazon does really well is connecting with the customers, understanding what their pain points are, where it is that they need Amazon to contribute. And as we went on that journey, talking to customers, talking to partners, it became clear to us that there's still things that our customers expect from AWS in that mission of empowering content creators and developers. And so we took this logical step to open source the Amazon Lumberyard game engine. We launched it last year alongside the Linux Foundation and 26 other partners. It is a completely open source Apache 2.0 licensed game engine. And I think while on paper you could say it's the successor to Lumberyard, our team went through a significant amount of effort to retool it, re-architect it, and build it with the hopes of it being a successful project for the open source community, right? I think one of the biggest learnings for me over the last couple of years has just been how much involved our development efforts have to be with building and maintaining a game engine, right? There's a reason why there's only a handful of large commercial game engines out there which support the kind of AAA quality, high fidelity experiences, right? And it takes quite a bit of effort. And so I think as we went on this journey, it became clear to us that we wanted to ensure that the architecture of this engine helped it serve our customers for many, many years to come. And so we retooled the engine in ways that I thought were interesting, right? Game engines tend to be rather monolithic. They're less like web services, more like an operating system. We're talking about millions of lines of code, many different subsystems, many private and public libraries. You're talking about restricted code from your console partners and whatnot. And I think the team did a really good job over the last couple of years once we made the decision to open source to start to modularize this engine, which does a couple of things, quite frankly. One is, again, being very customer focused. I think it gives customers the opportunity to pick and choose parts of this technology, things that they may want to pick up and combine with other off-the-shelf products or investments they've made internally. And so there's freedom of choice here, right? Something that's core to open source projects. And I think the second part of it is just being very strategic about it. For open source projects to be successful, you want to ensure that you lower the barrier to entry, even for contributors. It's not just for customers, it's about the community wanting to contribute back. And so having a modular architecture allows us to do just that, where folks with the relevant expertise can come in and contribute back code to this project. And so, we just launched it last year, and it's still early days. Open source projects take years often to become successful, but we think we're on the right path. And I think as long as we pace ourselves well, collaborate with the community and our partners in this foundation, I think there's a bright future for this technology and for the 3D community at large ahead.
Lovely, completely, yeah, because I think it's the most ideal time you guys built an open source 3D engine platform. We are breaking away from our 2D world and going to be entering the 3D world. And the opportunity is so humongous. I mean, it's a content creator's paradise, because so far we've been restricted onto a 3D world, but this AR, VR, MR, Metaverse, Web 3.0, it's taking us into a 3D world. That means anything and everything that we experience largely is going to be 3D. It's not that it's going to be only 3D, but it's largely going to be 3D. Exactly how we see and experience things in a real life. Because the goal of Web 3.0 or the Metaverse is to create persistent, immersive experiences, which is like as physical as possible. I mean, as real as possible, because that's the goal, because that's when you will really feel immersed. I know it's gonna take some time, but I think that's where the vision is, and I'm sure it's a great time to start. Though I have not seen much kind of promotion or push of O3DE, so maybe you could address that, talk about that. And also talk about its capabilities. You said it's been a year since the launch. Who are the partners? What have they built?
The writing on the wall for me is that we're going through a very fundamental shift in our industry. As you pointed out, there's this massive push for all things 3D, and we certainly see that both on the gaming side, where it's already been a thing, right? For folks on the gaming side who have played Second Life as an example, the metaverse may not be a new thing as such. But on the non-gaming side, I think there certainly is a lot of excitement from enterprise customers of AWS with wanting to do more with 3D, wanting to build immersive applications. And certainly I think some of the things that have transpired in the last couple of years with COVID, the work from home situation for a lot of companies, I think that's accelerated this as well, right? So I think the timing is right for a push to be made in support of these new use cases and in support of these new innovations. I think one of the most important things here is to remember that when we talk about the metaverse, when we talk about companies across various industries collaborating together, I think that word decentralization and democratization that we all like to overuse actually becomes something important, right? I think of it this way, right? I think today the games industry largely tends to look at game engines as something that they need to build a project. They pick the game engine of their choice, they build projects. As we move into some of these new non-gaming spaces, as well as sort of generally what we describe as the metaverse, right? Culmination of the physical and digital, or culmination of different sort of technologies from different industries coming together. I think it's going to be important to enable collaboration across those different industries. That becomes difficult unless that technology is open, right? And I think what we've done with O3DE is take down the barriers of licensing and allow folks within the community, partners generally, to come together and evolve the technology in interesting ways, which needs to happen for that next step, right? There's a lot of gaps today in this metaverse strategy. I think, one of the things that I think most people in this space will acknowledge is the lack of standardization, the lack of interoperability. And so for that, a lot of these technologies will have to come together, and I don't see a better playing field than the open source land. for some of these conversations to happen, where you are ultimately empowering the community to make the choices that it needs to make. And I think for those reasons, you're also seeing a lot of partners come and join us in this effort, right, alongside us and the Linux Foundation. Um, so we launched this in preview, the Open 3D engine in preview, July 5th of 2021, and then we made our first sort of public ready drop available November rather, alongside again the partners. And in the last few months, what we've seen is at least from my perspective, a better than expected response from the community. So I tend to still think that this is a long-term sort of opportunity for the 3D development community as a whole. But I think the early signs are very positive, right? We're already seeing about somewhere close to like 10% of the contributions come from some of these new partners joining in, which for a project that's just in its second month of being publicly available is a very good sign. We've already seen contributions, from Red Hat with Linux support, which I think is foundational for some of these new use cases. We've seen partners like Cesium bring their 3D mapping and tiling technology into Open 3D Engine. We've seen contributions from other partners within the community. Some of them sort of established players like Niantic and Adobe and others. And I'm not going to steal the Linux Foundation's thunder here, but there's two very large announcements that I expect they'll be making soon with additional partners coming into the fold, which I think will move the needle in a significant way. So fingers crossed, but I think we're starting to see some real good momentum here.
When you touched that there's all of these partners that you're working with. Is there anything that has been built which has caught your attention, and maybe you could possibly share some enterprise application, because digital twins is such a big thing. Nvidia Omniverse has tied up with the automobile company, I'm forgetting the name, but there's some really exciting things happening. So would you like to talk about that, some experiences built or leveraging your platform?
As far as like the strategy with this engine goes, right? Like there's the Amazon efforts, right? Like there are things that we're doing to enable new use cases, and then there's the community. So I'll speak to both, right? So our focus as AWS for the time being is, I'd say roughly, threefold, right? One is we want to ensure that we make the technology, the engine, generally usable, right? It's still early days, like I said. We've been through a re-architecture. There's still things that need to be built on this engine. There's still, I'd say, usability improvements certainly are the ones that come to mind for me. It's for our engine, it's something that has always been an area of investment. And we expect to continue to make investments on that front. It's important that we lower the barrier to entry for especially non-technical users. When we talk about creators and content creators, I think it's important to make the technology accessible. So that's going to be a focus. I think we also want to leverage our strengths, something that I think we could have done better in the past, and we certainly expect to be doing a whole lot better going forward, and already have leading up to this launch, is leveraging our strengths. And for us, that's ensuring that we provide the scalability of the cloud to developers at large, right? And so I think there's always this lofty end goal for a lot of folks in this space to build cloud native services and cloud native technology. I tend to think of it as more of an iterative approach, right? Especially when it comes to engines. So I think there's an opportunity here for us to lean into our strengths as AWS, as well as work with partners like Epic and others, and build sort of cloud assisted, cloud enabled, and then ultimately down the line, hopefully sort of cloud native applications in this space. And then the third part of it is, again, from an AWS focused perspective, is while we continue to support the engine for our gaming customers, we also want to make meaningful improvements on the non-gaming side. And so you mentioned digital twins is certainly one of those areas of investment. Support for our robotics customers and autonomous vehicle developers is another area of opportunity for us, something that, through the rest of this year, you'll see capabilities with the engine for those set of customers coming through. And so I think that's kind of where our focus is. And I think there's a lot of exciting stuff there. And then there's the community contributions, right? Both through partners as well as customers. And I think that's where you'll see a lot of momentum now coming through. I don't want to do the job of announcing projects on behalf of others, but I can tell you generally, I can allude to the fact that there'll be a lot more contributions and projects on the non-gaming side coming through faster. Just the nature of how projects in the non-gaming side tend to happen, right? They can be churned out at a much faster clip than your typical sort of AAA game, which may take many years to develop. And so I think like for us, I think, the opportunities early on are going to be enabling digital twin customers, enabling robotics customers. We've got open robotics as part of, the foundation. So I think, it's safe to say that we should expect a ROS2 integration with the engine sometime soon. And that's something that our team's, very actively working on. So a lot of opportunities there. And then, when you look at sort of the broader canvas, right, of the technologies around, I think one of the benefits of open source is that not only can you collaborate with other players in this space, right? Again, full freedom to collaborate with, folks at NVIDIA on Omniverse and other things. It's an open project and anybody can pick it up and use it in interesting ways. But I also think that there's an opportunity for a lot of these developers to pick the technology and actually use that as a starting point, as a foundation to build something new. And I think that's also a pretty reasonable starting point for a project like this, right? Where there might be developers trying to build something new that want tighter control over their destiny. They want, sort of control over the technology. And I think O3D serves as a great foundation for a lot of these customers to just, adopt the technology and build on top of it, for their very own sort of unique purposes. And you'll see some of that coming through hopefully in the near future as well.
Lovely. Yeah, are you looking at tapping the huge Indian community over here of 3D developers?
Absolutely. So I think this is, for me, the opportunity in India goes beyond O3DE, right? I think for O3D generally, we have a very well-defined sort of roadmap areas where we as AWS will focus on and where the partners are focusing on. And I think, that's mostly region agnostic, right? But I think in general, like when you talk about the opportunity in India, I think that is such an underserved market today. So to put it another way, you're going to have a massive influx of some percentage of this 1 billion plus population, stepping into some of these new technologies. And I think the signs are there. I was in India late last year when I had the opportunity to meet you in person. And I was just really taken aback by even the commercials on TV, right? Between your IPL and cricket matches, one of the things I would often tell my friends was it was kind of surprising to me to notice that 1 out of every 3 commercials was either about what I'd call eventually the path to creator economy, right? Play to earn or create to earn sort of opportunities. There was crypto, right? A lot of talk of crypto. And then generally, what I would say is like, a lot of new services and products coming online that sort of lead to this path to digitization for a lot of companies. So very interesting times. And I definitely think that India is going to be a huge market, both, as a consumer as well as a supplier of creator content.
Right, yeah, there's some exciting things happening. Obviously, we've got such a huge developer community over here, the engineers, and so yes, there's some exciting movements happening over here. Would you like to kind of unpack what creator economy is and how are the creators going to benefit from O3D?
I think what Web 3.0 does is largely change that interaction model around the creator economy to make this bi-directional in a way where users within a community can create content and transact in many different ways, right? So it's no longer just like one to many, it's many to many. And I think that's really exciting, right? Like the amount of people who are going to come online and discover that there's maybe interesting ways to earn a living, earn an income through those channels is going to be pretty massive. And I want to be careful about this, right? There's a pretty large disclaimer here that there is a lot of hype around a lot of these new use cases, and it's important to be conscious and aware of that. I think some of that hype hopefully fades away. This is just, the history of the internet has always being, you go through these bubbles and those bubbles burst. But what you're left behind with is the stable applications and the technology that serves foundational for the years ahead. So it's actually, it's scary in some ways, but it's actually a good thing, because when the bubble bursts and some of the noise dissipates, what you're left behind with is the technology that's here to stay. So I think, to answer your question, really, I think going forward, the creator economy is going to be about users generating content and being able to transact with it in many bidirectional, many-to-many transactional, ways.
In your view, do you see this Web 3.0, this whole decentralization narrative some of the biggest companies are trying to sell? Is it gonna become a reality, or is it again going to be like the one evil of capitalism going to another thing in the name of a new decentralized thing?
I think the truth is, let's get realistic about it, right? I think the idea of any one or two or three large corporations driving the vision of this metaverse and hoping for, or driving for decentralization, I think that's difficult, right? And it's difficult generally because you're talking about, corporations driven by profit, and companies that have responsibilities towards their shareholders, towards their obviously customers and employees as well. But I think there's a conflict of interest at some level, right? And so I would hope that a lot of these companies would come to the table and help drive standards and interoperability. But the truth is that whenever we're at a crossroads like this, it's typically the time for disruption, typically a time for somebody new to step up and take the lead, right? And so this is the section where it's more my opinion, because this is a very hot, controversial topic. So disclaimer, just my opinion. And I will be the first to admit I'm not an expert, so I could be totally wrong about it. But in my opinion, I think most likely what we're going to see is rather than there being like one large metaverse where we all live happily ever after, it's going to be a collection of these, right? And you could call it the metaverse. For me, it's just a natural extension of the technology that we've already had in place on the game side, right? And I think we'll see a collection of these, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It is okay for there to be a metaverse where we go for entertainment, where we hang out with our friends and family and we watch movies together and we play games together. And it's okay for there to be a different metaverse where we go for learning and where we go to get educated, or a different one. Certainly, I hope the metaverse that focuses on collaboration at work and other things is certainly disjointed from my personal metaverse, right? I'd like for that to be the case. And so I think there's a case to be made for there to not be one large metaverse, right? For I think a lot of philosophical and principled reasons, but then there's also the technological limitations, right? We're just not there yet. And so I think a logical approach here is one where you start to see sort of the beginnings of some of these platforms, if you will. And at some point you reach inflection where these, maybe new or old companies just start talking to each other and go, hey, you know what? I've got this great community around this entertainment metaverse that I've built. I'd love for that community to work with yours. Can we figure out a way to, support each other, to transact, or so on and so forth? And I think that's probably the more practical way of doing this, or actually working out. The risk also with large companies trying to drive this one metaverse approach that works for everybody is that there are going to be some vested interest there, right? And so you may end up now building standards that turn out don't provide the scalability and the freedom maybe down the line, right? And so I think it's important, again, for the community to kind of come together. And that's exactly what's happening today, right? This is largely today a community-driven experience, with the exception of one or two big companies that have a bold vision here. But I think some of the micro improvements you're seeing, and they're happening very fast, is within the community. I don't want to single out any one company here, also because, like I said, I'm not an expert here. I do enough to kind of follow the industry trends. But I'll tell you, like I've seen, great communities build around like Solana and Polygon and other projects like that. A lot of great momentum there. And I think eventually you start seeing the community coming together and saying, hey, this is how the technology needs to evolve. These are the lessons of the past. Let's not make them. And that's kind of my view of things. And I think that's okay. I do think that we still end in the right place in the end, but one that is more driven by people as opposed to large entities, just operating in a silo.
Right, yeah, and I hope we get to that future where it's more driven by the people rather than just a few handful of companies. And the best part, like you mentioned, I think there is some excellent movement happening. In the entrepreneurs, the new bunch of entrepreneurs, they have a desire to correct the wrongs. And we truly want to make a difference because the opportunity is humongous. When we talk about the Web 3.0, the metaverse, I mean, we are building the entire, possibly maybe a one-to-one of the entire physical world in a digital space, and we are in 2022. Maybe by 2032 that world could be so excellent. Maybe we could touch feel those virtual world, and maybe though we'll be living in those virtual world more, because that's the space where you break away from the limitations of your physical world, because the physical world has got so many limitations. It restricts you, the boundaries, the religion, the culture, the politics. The metaverse could truly be a place where you could be free. You could just be a happy human being. So I maybe it's just me being a little bit roused. Yeah, I think you want to add something.
And I agree with you. I think there's a lot of opportunities here in many different ways, and we're going to see innovations in interesting areas. I think the collaboration part is spot on, right? And I don't know if those interactions necessarily need a metaverse, but I certainly hope that we unlock a lot of these interactions. I'm a big believer in just diversity, like exposing yourself to a diversity of perspectives, opinions, people from different backgrounds. I can tell you, certainly because of my journey being an immigrant in this country, and having the exposure that I had growing up in India, where I went to a Catholic school, was surrounded by folks from different backgrounds, different religions, having access to sort of neighbors from a different background. I'm sure as somebody who's also lived in Mumbai, you kind of understand the sentiment where you truly live in a metropolitan area. And I can tell you now that I'm much older, I kind of recognize the importance of that exposure, both to people from various backgrounds and as well as socioeconomic sort of classes, if you will, right? And I think I found that to be foundational in my growth over the years. And I certainly hope that the technology that we build going forward allows for more of those interactions. And I think, we are on the right track. We see that with social media today, right? Where we see these exchange of ideas. And of course, there's a lot of clutter. There are things about social media that I don't like. I personally don't, have a lot of social media interactions. But I'll tell you, I think the one key sort of benefit of social media is the interactions. There's also pitfalls there, but I think it provides for a lot of access to folks who typically don't have access, who don't have opportunities. And I think that's very promising. And I think that's a big part of the creator economy story, right? The empowering of the user. So you think about the fact that one, with these new experiences, you're going to now have folks from all over the world come in and be able to tap their talents and be able to earn for the skills that they have, right? And I think there's a lot of sort of boundless opportunities there, whether it's for games or non-gaming stuff, like all kinds of opportunities available in that space. And then there's the other part of it, which is as more companies come on board, right? As enterprises want to build their metaverse, guess what they're going to need? They're going to need a ton of content. And I feel like, the last, like the 90s and early 2000s, and even now, we've been through this massive revolution, certainly for a lot of developing countries where you've seen folks flow into technology and start to make really good income there. I think the next step is going to be you're going to see sort of the more creative folks take the lead. And again, I think that's a massive opportunity for a whole new workforce to come online and make a living in interesting new ways. Another controversial subject is whether you want this space to be regulated or deregulated, right? And I think when you talk about decentralization and you talk about an open metaverse, I think the instinct probably of most folks there is by default, you don't want those kind of regulations. You want the community to sort of police itself. And I think while there's advantages to that approach, where you don't have that one or two entities controlling everything, there's also pitfalls, right? And we've seen some of this with social media, where I think governments have often been slow to pick up on the advancements happening in this world. And I think it's important, and I don't have a solution here for anybody, but what I would say is one of the key things that needs to happen is for governments across the world to pay close attention to how technology is evolving and stay connected and do both, provide support to creators building technology generally. I think that's one. And then two is work alongside the community that's building out the infrastructure, the foundations for this so-called metaverse, and stay involved. Have a seat at the table in some ways, right? Not in ways where they're regulating and policing the investments being made, but it's certainly important for, at the very least, for our leaders to understand the technology. I think it's comical in some ways when you see Senate hearings here in the U.S. when you have technology leaders going up to our government leaders, right? Leaders in the government. And it's pretty clear that not a lot of them understand how the technology works and how companies monetize the technology. And I think it's important that our governments kind of stay in step and certainly work with the community, provide the developer community the support they need. And I think that's going to be critical going forward, because we're going to be very out of sync if not. We're moving at a very fast pace when it comes to the tech itself. And I think on the regulation side of things, we're still kind of debating like, hey, is blockchain a real thing? Is cryptocurrency a real thing, right? And I certainly hope that there's no government overreach there, but I think it's important that the government is aware of what's happening. And I think it's especially important in countries like India, where again I see a massive opportunity not just for users to flow in, but for content creators to flow in. And I think it's important that countries look out for those opportunities because it's going to translate into completely new employment streams, things that we haven't seen before. And I think it's going to catch a lot of leaders across the world unaware when they start seeing massive changes, which I think we've already started seeing in the last couple of years through movements like the Great Resignation that's happening, certainly in the US.
Right. Yeah. So this technology, it's that tool which can possibly, maybe how Yuval Noah Harari says, from Homo sapiens, we have the opportunity to go to Homo Deus. We can become godlike, and that's where we are going. I mean, this possibly the next few years, it's the entire metaverse thing is gonna add huge benefits across enterprise and for consumers also, content creators specifically. Post that, with companies such as Neuralink, a kernel creating brain-computer interface, then I don't know. I mean, the lines of what is real will start getting blurred, but not getting into that. I think we're getting into an exciting space. Wish you and your team the very best. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. And until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Eddie. Great to have this conversation.